little bit about them, and then you can come down and take a look at it yourself. Put some money in the jug if you want to. Get yourself a pen and go outside and buy another drink if you're still thirsty. Help me welcome Professor Busby.
I'm going to talk real fast because that's just the way I talk. That my students know I talk real fast. Okay, so in 1977 I was 24 and I started my job, and I met some older doctors who had kind of invented respiratory care. They were pulmonary doctors. And respiratory therapy, association started in 1951, which is right about the time of the polio epidemic. So in a way we came about because of the need for mechanical ventilation. Now, the first mechanical ventilation that went off in huge amounts was the iron lung. Now, this one is not the one I worked with. I worked with one that was painted yellow, and it was an Emerson. And but I'll go ahead and explain how this worked. You have to imagine this rigid thing as your chest wall, which is rigid. And when your diaphragm goes down, this thing right here goes down. It makes this space here create a vacuum. The patient's head is sticking out of this hole here, and the gas goes, now he has a vacuum, the gas goes in. So the iron lung replaces the muscles that don't work. Actually, the negative pressure ventilator still has a use, and there are, believe it or not, there are people on negative pressure ventilators. They're not on the iron lungs anymore, but they're on some newer versions, because it still works for people who don't have muscle strength. Now, I'm going to talk about the problems. I know there's a lot of nursing students here, so I want to talk about the problems the nursing students had and the respiratory therapists had with maintaining a patient inside this. The patient's head was in here, and there's a little place that his head, a little platform that his head and the pillow would lie on. And when I had to set up the seal, obviously you lock these things in place, but we also had some other problems because where his head came through was a leak. So before we put the patient in, I would have to get a little strip of, it was a little plastic foam. It was about 3/4 of an inch, and it was about this long, like a scarf, and I would wrap it in a pillowcase and make it soft, and I would put it around their neck, and I would pin it to them, not to them, but I would pin it with a safety pin, and then I'd put their head in. And when their head went in, we had to open this thing up, and I don't want to open this because I don't know if this thing's broken or not, but we would pull this out. You have to pull it all the way out to put the patient in. And it would take a bunch of us putting the patient in. The people and the nurses usually were moving the patient in, and I was holding their head, and we used to refer to it as giving birth, because I'd have to hold their head and kind of pull them in, like you're kind of helping somebody being born. And it's real uncomfortable, so I protect their face with my hand, and my hand would get scraped up because these things were kind of rough. Then once I got them on, I had to make sure the pillow was just right, because for this to work properly, they have to lie on their back. They cannot lie on their side. They can't lie on their belly. They only can lie on their back. And the pillow had to be exactly right, because the hole is round, and if the pillow was too high, the patient pushed up and made it into an oval, and it leaked on the bottom. If the pillow was too low, it had an oval, it turned it into an oval, and the patient would leak on top. So I had to have it sealed up real tight. Then every time we went in, we'd open this up, and if you notice, this closes around my hand. And we had a place here to go in. We had a place here to go in. And if I had to draw blood gas, I had to do it like this. Like this. One time I couldn't feel, and the pressure started sucking the blood out of my brain. And I felt like I was going to get dizzy and pass out. I thought, if I pass out, I'm going to be hanging on the end of this. Nobody's going to know it. I finally pulled out and asked somebody else to draw it. It turned out I had a peripheral neuritis that was happening because I was on medicine and I wasn't feeling too well. I mean, I physically wasn't feeling the pulses, and that's why I couldn't get my gas. Now, the nurses, what they had to do, if they had to put the patient on a bedpan, they had to open this up and move real fast, because they had to scoot them out of the bedpan and try not to spill it on the way out. And the whole time they were doing it, the patient couldn't breathe. And one time I made a mistake of standing too close. She pulled it out and just handed it to me. And I said, but I went ahead and held it, being glad I'm a respiratory therapist. So it had these holes here. Now, the version I had a hole on top for the IV. And when the nurse had all her IVs could go in and out only one place. The gastric tube, everything went in and out up here. And we would spend hours every day taping and retaping the duct tape to make that a tight seal around all the tubes. And we used to dread having to start a new tube because I had to sit there and make that real nice and tight. Now what is missing here, and this is probably, I don't know this model, but this is probably what it was a big manometer. And it also had a battery that ran the alarm. And, well, you guys aren't old enough to know this, but the battery was an old-fashioned phone. And it used to tickle me because it sounded like the telephones that, there was a time, you guys don't know this, there was a time when telephones actually only had one sound. If you said the sound of a telephone, everybody knew it was one sound. Right. And it would ring off if we left one of these open, or somebody, forgot to close it tight, it would ring when the pressure dropped down. Now, one of the things that, one of the things that was real difficult with the iron lung, do you think a patient is hot inside this or cold? I thought they were hot. They're freezing. And one of the worst things about taking care of patients inside the iron lung is you couldn't just cover them with a blanket. Imagine if you go out in the wintertime and you're butt naked and all you've got is a blanket around you and the wind's blowing up under your blanket. So we had to have them in PJs, long sleeves, and they had to have either footies or they had to have socks on to keep them warm. And if we didn't get this real tight on the back, remember I said that could be a leak, it'd give them a horrible headache because they get that cold wind. And it was just like somebody sitting there with an ice pad right on their neck. Their muscles would probably get pretty stiff. They get terrible headaches. One time I couldn't get this kid warm, and I asked one of the older doctors, I said, I can't get this kid warm. We've got him in blankets, we've got him in PJs, and he looked at me, he says, well, Mrs. Busby, you need to get him a light bulb. I said, a light bulb? He says, yeah, the light bulb, because there's a light here. He said, the light bulb, he said, what you got in there, a 60 watt? He said, get a 75 watt, and it worked. Makes sense, the light bulb was hot. I mean, the light bulb was hot and it warmed it up just enough because we were almost there. Now, let me be sure I don't miss anything. Okay, now, to assist patients in coughing, I don't see it on this particular model. No, it doesn't have one. The model I had, when this went down, okay, and then when it went back up again, it could create some positive pressure. So the other model I had, the model I worked with had a little vent that would vent it back to room air. And that vent had a little metal bar on it that I could physically hold down. And that's how I would cough people. I'd have to stand there, and I either get another therapist or a nurse to stand there with a Yonker suction, and they were ready to catch it when they coughed. And I would wait, I'd watch the manometer, and I'd watch the model I had, it came out here, so it was kind of easy for me to see that. And I'd watch when it did a breath in, I would crank it, well first I'd crank it up and make it give a deep breath. When they got that real deep breath in, and when it started coming back, I'd close the top, and when the manometer got to 0, I'd yell cough, and the patient would cough, and I'd be pushing down, and I'd help push them and help them cough. So those of y'all that have me know that that's abdominal squeeze that we were doing, except we were doing it with this thing. Now the other model I had, to do chest PT, we had a hydraulic lift that I could crank up, and the whole bed would go up. The end of it would be up here, and you have to imagine this thing is about the size of a VW, and it's the weight of a VW, and it was real scary. The nurses hated when I cranked it up, because I get it cranked up, the head be down here, the top would be down here, and we always try to keep everybody away from it just in case a hydraulic lift went, because we know it'd kill anybody that was down there if it ever popped back down. Now, the other thing we used to do when we did chest PT, when we did chest PT, of course, we'd have to come in here, and I usually talk to another therapist